Um, I had promised to come and let you guys know what was going on after I saw my doctor. And I went and saw them, and I'm not going to bury the lead. I have a condition called pseudotumor cerebri. Uh, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what that is and how the journey to get here was. But I have some very important things that I need to say before I get into that. Firstly, I'm Cozy. If you're finding this and you've never seen me before, I usually make content about reality television, specifically Sister Wives. If that's of interest to you, please check out my other videos. If it's not, that's okay. I'm not going to be offended. If you just came here to hear about this because you're like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this before and I'm curious. But importantly, right out the gate, I need to say, very much so, I am not using this in any way, shape, or form to give medical advice or diagnosis to anybody. Come on, kitty, kitty. If you think that you have any of these symptoms, please see your doctor. I'm just a YouTuber. I don't have any way of diagnosing. But if you have concerns and you're like, oh my gosh, this sounds like me, please see your doctor. If at all possible, your eye doctor. Though you can discuss it with your primary care also. Secondly, I am not using this to malign or disparage anyone who has tried to help me in the last 11 years on this journey at all. I don't think that any of the doctors did anything wrong necessarily. I don't think that there was much else that could have been done. One moment. I don't think that there was much else that they could have done other than what they did. This is Freckles. Freckles is very concerned because I've been crying and she would like to come and help. So if you see her, I'm sorry. She just needs attention too. So let's jump into it. So for the last 11 years, I have been having symptoms that no one can explain. Symptoms that often I'm told are all in my head. And they're not wrong, but they're not right either. Pseudotumor cerebri is a disorder where the pressure inside your skull increases for no real reason. It's also called Idiopathic Intracranial Hypertension, and it mimics a brain tumor. Basically, your cerebrospinal fluid does not reabsorb into your body correctly and creates intense pressure in the skull. It can occur in adults and kids, but it's really very common in women of childbearing years, especially those who tend to be a little overweight like myself. And I know that that's probably not something that people want to hear, but it is the truth. And it causes swelling of the optic nerve and potentially can result in vision loss. So that is a basic overview of what it is. So let's get started where it started. 11 years ago, I was about 7 months pregnant with my first child, and I started having this weird vision problem where it was like looking through a kaleidoscope. Like the whole world went into kaleidoscope mode. And I pulled off into a parking lot. Ironically enough, the parking lot of the medical offices where my OBGYN was. And I called my mom and I was like, I can't see. Like, I can't see. I used voice calling to call you. I can't see. Everything's starting to go dark. I don't know what to do. She's like, are you dizzy? I was like, no, I'm not passing out. I'm going blind. She's like, okay. So we figured all that out. The vision came back and I called my doctor's office and they're like, yeah, we'd like to see you. So I went to see them and they're like, maybe it's positional. Maybe it's just the way baby's laying. But they decided to get an MRI just in case. And I went into the MRI, which, let me tell you, an MRI while you're pregnant is terrifying. I actually threw up partway through it. I don't know why. I don't know if it was nerves or what it was, but it made me very ill. And they came back and they were like, looks like you got some sinus disease, so we are going to give you some antibiotics. And I took the antibiotics. I was okay, but I wasn't great. And nothing seemed to get better. And I was discussing with my doctor, and I'm like, I'm having all these headaches. My sinuses feel messed up, like all this stuff. And she's like, well, we did see that on the MRI. You might just have a chronic sinus issue. Sounds like ocular migraines. She's like, how long have you had headaches? I was like, I don't know, since I was like 13. She's like, yeah, that sucks. I was like, yeah, it does. And she genuinely tried to help. She tried to find anything that she could to try and help me, to alleviate the migraines and everything. But I was pregnant, so it's not like there's a ton of medication that you can take while you're pregnant. And I intended to breastfeed, so there wasn't a ton of medication I could take then either. So this keeps happening off and on. I know they're kind of monitoring, making sure I'm not like having strokes. They're making sure my blood pressure's not out of control. Like, they're doing everything that they can to make sure baby's born. And things start fading away. And so we were like, okay, maybe it was just positional. Maybe he was just laying on a nerve funny. And I was still getting headaches, but I wasn't getting like the blindness like I was. I know. She's just down here purring. I'm so sorry. And I thought everything was fine. And then, I don't know, somewhere in there, after losing all the baby weight and breastfeeding everything, you lose a lot of weight then. I started to slowly gain the weight back, and as I was gaining the weight back, I started having the weird symptoms again. And now I had a new one. Phantom smells. I have, for the last 9 years, at random moments of my life, been able to smell things that no one else smells. Most often, it is fire. And I'm not talking like smoke. Like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, no, you mean like campfire smoke. No. You know how, maybe you don't. Maybe this is not a universal thing. But fire itself. Like, when a fire is going, not just like sticking your face in the smoke, but there is a distinct smell to fire. I would smell it all the time. I started going through my house checking at night because I could smell, it smelled like everything was on fire. And I would go through and I would check every electrical outlet, and I would check the oven, and I would check the microwave and the toaster. I started unplugging things at night because I was convinced something was on fire. And I also have obsessive compulsive disorder, so that created this whole new compulsion I had to work through. And it would happen a lot. Even up to now, I'll say to my husband, do you smell that? And a lot of times he's like, no, it's not real. It's okay. You can calm down. It's not real. Okay, thank you. And it doesn't always have to be fire. Sometimes it's other things. 2 nights ago. 2 nights? Last night? No, I think it was 2 nights ago. I just sat bolt upright on the couch. I was kind of like leaned over, just hanging out with the family. And I sat bolt upright and I'm like, I smell coffee. Is the Keurig okay? Nobody was making coffee. There was no coffee. He had to tell me it wasn't real. And I calmed down, because as long as it's not real, I'm okay, And which sounds insane because most people are like, well, if it's real, then I'm fine. No, as long as it's not real, I'm okay. But I added that to the list of symptoms, and they were like, it's probably just chronic sinus. So I keep going. And then I have the twins. And I'm thinking, well, I had these issues while I was pregnant with my first. This is definitely going to happen again. Like, this is going to happen again. And it didn't. And I had other issues. I was so sick with them for a long time. I lost more weight in a twin pregnancy than I gained the entire pregnancy. I came out of it, like, I don't remember, like 10 pounds lighter than when I went in. It was insane. Because I couldn't even keep down water. It was crazy. So we weren't having those issues. Babies are born. Everything seems great. I'm breastfeeding and pumping, and I'm losing a ton of weight because of it. And then I kind of just hit this wall of depression, anxiety, my OCD, because of the girls in the NICU. I already had a hand washing compulsion, and you're washing your hands constantly in the NICU, and I was constantly on edge about every little thing that I needed to make sure that I did perfectly in step so that they could come home. I have, because my OCD, I have issues with numbers, and I have issues with germs and things like that. And so just like the constant trying to control the numbers the weight, the how much this one ate or what this one needed or what that, and it was bad, and it's still not great. But because of that, I started putting the weight back on. And as I was putting the weight back on, it would happen again. I would get the headaches, and I would start losing my vision, and I would get really dizzy, and I would see everything look like a kaleidoscope. I was having constant neck and back and shoulder pain all of the time. And for years, I mean years, I've had this ringing in my ears that will not go away, and I can't hear. And a lot of times people thought that, I thought, because of my ADHD, I just had an auditory processing issue, where people would, people talk to you and you say what, and then halfway through their sentence you answer them. No, it's because I could hear part of their sentence, but not all of it. And so when I would say what, I would put all of the pieces together and be able to answer them again. I was having this constant thumping in my head, not painfully, but just this constant thumping in my head, like I could feel my heartbeat in my brain all of the time. And so it would get progressively worse. And finally, I was having dizzy spells to the point where I wasn't able to stand up to do the dishes anymore. I wasn't able to actively homeschool my girls. I had to stop taking, I used to take them to the park daily. And we would go for a walk, and we'd go for a walk in the woods, and we'd play in the park, and that was kind of our outside time. I had to stop. All of it. I had to stop being on the treadmill. I had to, everything that I was used to doing, I had to stop because I was so dizzy. And every time I would get dizzy, I would get that pressure in my head again, even worse. And the ringing would get louder. And it was like, oh, I'm going to faint, but I never fainted. And then I'd lose my vision, or I'd get a really severe headache. And so I said, I'm going to tell my doctor about this. And so at my annual checkup, I mentioned it. And she's like, okay, well, let's get an MRI. Let's do these things. And we did. And it came back normal again. And she put me on antibiotics for a sinus infection. Didn't help. I went back and I was like, it's getting worse. And she's like, well, okay. So we tried something else. And then she said, go to an ENT. So I did. And the ENT audiologist, they're like, there's nothing wrong with your hearing. Your sinuses look fine. I guess you must just have a chronic sinus infection, and gave me antibiotics. And I was like, I just want to be off these antibiotics. I feel like I'm constantly on antibiotics. And I was on antibiotics all the stinking time. And I was getting so much worse. And every time I would have to take the antibiotics, I would get really sick. Like the dizziness would get worse. I felt like I couldn't move. Everything felt like moving through quicksand. The thumping would get worse. Everything got so much worse. And I didn't know what to do. And finally, after a short period of time, I said to my husband, I'm done. I'm not seeing the doctors anymore. I'm not taking the antibiotics anymore. I'm not doing any of it. I'm getting worse, not better. And I would rather just be dizzy and have to sit down for everything than get this much worse. And I don't know what exactly happened, but one day I lost the vision of my left eye pretty much completely. It started off very kaleidoscopy in both eyes, and then things just went dark in my left eye. And it took nearly 2 hours before it came back. My right eye had come back, but my left eye, it was dark, and then it would come back very kaleidoscopy and took a long time to fade. I called my eye doctor, and in tears, I was like, listen, I don't know what to do. And they got me an appointment the next day. I went in and, we did the regular eye exam, and he's like, all right, we need to get a picture of your eye. And I was like, cool, we've done that. We've done that. That's fine. And he goes, flips the screen around and says, your ocular nerve is super swollen. I don't know what that means exactly. And he's like, I really need you to see, this other doctor, please. we're going to get you set up. We're going to get you an appointment. We'll get the recommendation over there. And we did. And all was pretty okay. And I was like, well, I don't know what to do. So I went online, and he had not given me a name for anything to look for. But I was like, well, okay, so I'm going to look up, what does it mean when your ocular nerve is swollen? So I look it up, and it's like, well, you could have optic neuritis or macular degeneration. And then I was like, none of this makes sense. And then I saw the words pseudotumor cerebri. And I went, that means false brain tumor. And of course, for years, that's what I had been being evaluated for, was a brain tumor, and I didn't have one. So I click on it, and I go through the list of symptoms. And they are everything that I had experienced for 11 years. Everything from the vision issues, to the headaches, to the sinus problems, to the dizziness. Just everything. And I go through and I'm like, okay. And then I see that it can be made worse by certain antibiotics. And it was in that moment that everything clicked. I was being sent by my regular eye doctor to go see somebody to find out if I had a false brain tumor. And I went. And they were like, that's definitely what we think this is. We need you to get a lumbar puncture. So a couple days before Thanksgiving, I go and I get this lumbar puncture. And it is miserable. And I go in, I am in tears. I don't do needles very well. They want to do blood work, and they're doing this lumbar puncture, and I am in tears. My poor father had to drive me because my husband was unavailable. And I wasn't allowed to drive myself to or from. And the doctor comes in and she's like, you are panicking. And she says, we need to calm you down. And they did. They gave me some medication to help calm down. And I was much, much better. At that point, I stopped crying. I was a little goofy because I said to one nurse, I was like, I swear I hear a dog. Like, because I was just sure I was hearing a dog. And she was like, yeah, there's a service dog. Somebody has it. And I was like, it sounds little. And she's like, it's tiny. I was like, it sounds shady and sus. Like, that's not, like, that's not me. Like, I'm like arguing with this dog I can't see. And then I thought I heard a meow. So then I kept asking if they were sure it was a dog and not a cat. And then for some reason I looked up, I saw on Twitter, X, something about possums living in somebody's house, and I had to look up what my state legislation was on whether or not I could own a possum. I cannot. I'm okay with that. I've come to terms. I was very sad at the time. It was just a wild ride. And they did the lumbar puncture, and they were super nice. So nice. I laid there for the hour. Everything was great. My dad brought me back home an hour back from the hospital, and laid down, just tried to take things easy. The next day, the headaches started, and they lasted until I think it finally went away the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So we're talking Wednesday to Sunday. Just every time I sat up, my head was pounding, but if I laid down, I was fine. And so I was like, this better have been worth it. So today I went, and she confirmed 100% this is pseudotumor cerebri. And I felt both a wave of relief to have a name and just intense sadness that for 11 years I missed out on things. People kept thinking that it was all in my head, and it is all in my head. It is quite literally literally in my head. But because the symptoms didn't make sense and nobody could link it together, people around me who they love and care about me, they couldn't understand. And I could see the frustration. I could see the frustration when I started losing my peripheral vision and I was too afraid to drive. I could see the frustration when I would get dizzy doing simple things like making dinner or doing the dishes. I could see the frustration on my kid's face when I stopped being able to do the same things that I was doing with them. And so, I genuinely hope that if you are out there and you're listening to this and you're still here, if you are experiencing something that people cannot explain, it does not mean you are crazy. It does not mean it is all in your head. You may just need to seek the next step. And sometimes it's hard to know what that next step is without somebody to help you find it. I certainly wouldn't have known that I need to see a neurologist to be put on medications, potentially long term, to keep this under control. But what I do know is that I made one phone call out of frustration and fear. And in less than an hour, I had an answer to a problem that I had let go on for a decade. It is a hard thing to deal with, knowing that this had been going on for so long. And so obviously I'm still coming to terms with it. And I don't even have all the answers. And I am more than happy if you're following me and you want updates on how this goes when I see the neurologist and all of that. I'm more than happy to share with you guys. I'm more than happy to answer questions about, the weird symptoms I was having, or about just anything about this. I'm more than happy, but I am going to maintain a level of privacy insofar as I'm not going to give details that would be inappropriate to give to the public, right? I will tell you guys what I can tell you, that I had these weird symptoms, that all this was going on for such a long time. But I'm not going to share, like, who the doctor is, or who I'm going to go see, or where I live. Like, that's not happening, sorry. You guys can know I live in the Midwest, that's about all you really need to know. But what I did, I suppose, in closing, all I really want to say is, if you are having strange symptoms, keep fighting. Because I gave up for far too long, thinking that maybe I was just making a mountain out of a molehill. I gave up for a long time thinking that, and it put a lot more stress on me than it needed to. And just because something isn't the right answer doesn't mean that the people who are trying to answer the question have done you dirty. Sometimes there are things that one person can see that another person can't see, and that's why we need to keep getting opinions from specialists. They're there in the trenches dealing with these specialized things. So like I said, I'm not here to malign any of my doctors. I'm not here to say that they did me dirty or did me wrong. I actually felt like, for the most part, they genuinely cared what was going on, and that they were really, truly trying to help me solve the problem. I really did. My frustration lay with the problem not being solved and genuinely just not wanting to spend any more money on it. That's a me issue. But there it is. I have pseudotumor cerebri, or idiopathic intracranial hypertension, and I finally get a chance to live my life a little more normally, and I'm really excited about it. I haven't had ringing in my ears since the lumbar puncture had happened. I have not felt that pressure in my skull, and I'm just genuinely excited to know what it feels like to have a little bit more of a normal life. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for just being here to hang out with me and finding out a little bit more information about something that a lot of people have never heard of. And if you also have this and you are following me, just, hey, I know everybody's experience can be a little bit different, and I just genuinely hope that you were able to find answers and to get everything under control. And if you haven't found answers yet, keep looking. So I'm gonna go, and unless we have some developments in the Sister Wives world, you guys probably are not gonna hear from me anymore today. But if something wild and crazy happens, either look for some shorts or look for some videos, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye, y'all.